I don't think any animal carries as much majesty as the whale does. The Antarctic blue whale in particular is the biggest animal on Earth, the largest recorded one having a whopping length of 98 feet. And whales always seem to carry some sort of ethereal quality. Their intelligence, their apparent emotions, and their essentially being living representations of peace have always come alongside their immense size. Under these whales, though, deep below, where light begins to falter, the ocean contains other kinds of giants. One of the most commonly cited reasons to fear the deep I've seen on the internet is deep-sea gigantism. It's been suggested that it's caused by a lack of resources in the deep, meaning that larger creatures that can survive harsher conditions become the norm. Then again, that may not be the case either. Other suggestions include a lack of predators, or the colder temperature. But what's so interesting, and so simultaneously beautiful and unnerving, is the sheer size that these creatures can reach. While the whale may look peaceful and tranquil, and while we may be used to their size, seeing creatures like spider crabs and isopods reach such staggering sizes, especially when compared to their brethren that we find closer to the surface, is a different feeling entirely. There's an entire world that seems to lurk underneath us, down in the deep, where a tiny squid I've seen in a fish tank is paralleled by a magnificent, gigantic creature that's become an iconic piece of mythology, one that we barely have any live footage of. And it once again reminds me that I am so very small. There are 2 giant serpents in Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, and if you look hard enough, you could say that there are 3. You encounter the first great serpent 3 times in the game, while it lurks in the sunken valley. The first encounter forces you to sneak by it a few times before stabbing it in the eye. You find it again when it destroys a bridge you try crossing, which sends you down into the water below, where you once again have to avoid its attacks. In the final encounter with the Great Serpent, you jump atop of it, drag your sword along its head, pulling it down, and... the viscera the serpent drops afterwards effectively confirms that you've just killed a god. And to me, that felt a little underwhelming. The animation was great and all, but this apparently age-old serpent god couldn't possibly have been killed with just 2 button presses, right? Well, if you look at a cave in a corner of the Bodhisattva Valley, you might find something. It starts off with just the body, a familiar and eerie white pillar of scales that blocks your path. And when you reach the end, there's another serpent waiting, one without injuries, and one that's impossible to kill. It charges at you if you get too close, and if you do manage to get past it, its impenetrable scales prevent you from going back the way you came, no matter how many attacks you do. And, of course, the third snake, which is barely a snake at all. Remember that pillar of scales near the front of the cave? Well, that's not actually the same snake. Falling down shows, for just a moment, that there's a third snake burrowing its head down. Is it just a technical thing to show the length of the second snake? Probably. I doubt it's an actual lore-intended third snake. But the fact that you can see it without no clipping is somewhat weird, isn't it? This whole time that I've discussed the three serpents, I've never really said much about their physical threat. Well, obviously they're terrifying. They can kill you in a single strike, they cause the entire valley to rumble, and they force you to resort to stealth for nearly all of their encounters. But what's so threatening to me isn't their physical power, it's the fact that they exist at all. We never see the end of any of the serpents. For all we know, they could all connect to a single body beneath the earth, not unlike the hydras that FromSoft have already shown off. SCP-3000 is effectively a giant eel with an estimated length of 600 and 900 kilometers that rarely moves. What's so special about SCP-3000 is what it does. Directly observing it, or being within a certain distance of it, causes headaches, fear, memory loss, and paranoia. One of the first men who lays his eyes on it immediately bashes his own head against a submarine so hard that he dies. The chemical compound it excretes is used by the Foundation as an amnestic. A researcher that gazes upon it soon finds himself losing parts of his identity, parts of himself.
I don't remember my mother. I can hear her voice, but I can't remember her face. I can't remember how she smelled or how she... But what I do remember is she told me about gods. There is a god called Anantashesha, a serpent, the king of serpents, said to lie beneath Vishnu in the cosmos. A six-headed snake god. Isn't that something? This was a fear that I have refused to acknowledge for years. A fear of irrelevance, that no one will know who I am when I die. Afraid of being forgotten, afraid of my life being meaningless, afraid of being alone, afraid of dying.
He feeds himself to the serpent. Afterwards, the friend he speaks to begins to remember things wrongly. He remembers his own wife and child, except, of course, they belong to someone else. They belong to his friend, who was devoured by the serpent.
I do not think that the eel is Anantashesha. I don't think it would matter if it was. What is clear to me now as I feel myself coming apart is not that the eel is some mythological creature or divine serpent. Perhaps it is just a primitive creature that eluded us, holding no malice. Perhaps it really is a primordial deity, harboring resentment beneath the surface. But the eel is not the harbinger of my demise or humanity's doom. The eel is not the end of all things. It only shows us what the end looks like. Our end will be a forgotten one.
The Great Serpent isn't exactly scary because it's a giant serpent. What's so frightening is what it means and what it does to us, how it breaks us and makes us seem completely insignificant. Its very existence alters memories and scatters the soul. It reduces us humans into machines, and it does all of this simply by being there. There's this moment at the end of the Thriller Bark storyline in One Piece that stuck with me long after I stopped reading the series. As the crew celebrates another successful victory, this time in the Florian Triangle, a fictional, dark region reminiscent of the real-life Bermuda Triangle, Lola thinks she sees something in the distant fog, but dismisses it after a while. And then... In a show full of wacky and colorful silhouettes and shapes in character design, these beings are colorless, simple things, like pillars, and yet are taller than a mountain, dwarfing the entirety of Thriller Bark, which is itself already as large as an island. These pillars feel primordial. They don't feel like intruders or malevolent creatures. They simply are. And in a story full of expansive world building and details and secrets, these pillars with their glowing eyes have still gone unexplained. And I hope that they remain that way. They're reminiscent of the umibozu, giant sea spirits from Japanese folklore. They're giant shadows sinking ships, not unlike the mysterious disappearances in the Florian Triangle. And it's interesting to me that the positions of these behemoths create the shape of a triangle. Some giants are only really in the distance, and though they may be physically imposing, there's something more primal and special about their presence when they're just there. Not participating in the movements of the world, just existing, almost beyond it. These giants and their lack of participation in the world around them makes them even more impossible than the ones that we've seen before. The Straw Hats don't even see these towers of darkness. They're obscured by the fog. Elden Ring has its fair share of giant enemies. Giant bears, a giant deer, giant gargoyles, and Radahn, who's a giant demigod. The biggest lethal enemy in the game is the fire giant, the last of his kind. The rest of them all frozen corpses on their namesake mountaintops. He is colossal, but he still isn't the biggest. As we go bigger, the beings seem to become less and less present in the world. Greyall is a dragon that lies, sickly and dying, in a corner of the dragon barrow, surrounded by her children. She can't do much, but still, she's the mother of the dragons, the source of the many that we find all across the game. Of course, there's an even bigger dragon. The gigantic corpse of the ancient dragon Gransax lies dead in the royal capital, complete with his gigantic spear, and you have to scale his wing to progress through the game. It's fitting that the biggest dragon FromSoft has ever made is already a corpse. How much bigger can we go? Look at the cliff faces all across the mountaintops and Caelid, and you'll see skeletons that are larger than anything you see in the game. They've been constantly theorized about and talked about. They have no explanation, and yet you can feel that they're hinting at something primordial, buried in the ground, and yet something that's no longer present. And even those gigantic skeletons are completely dwarfed by the Forge. The ancient forge guarded by the fire giant is huge, supported by chains that you can find all over the mountaintops. There's not even any direct sign of giants here, just the implication. How big were the hands that forged these chains so massive and so unbreakable that they're used as bridges for everyone else? These examples are so passive, so absent, that we're reminded of how small we are, but that's been done a lot. The idea of the silent observer isn't really new. What I don't see much of in fiction is the giants in the game Nightslink by Noiseminded are more than just silent observers. Through Nightslink, you've recorded the sounds in a mysterious room you can't get to, distributing the audio tapes like they're some kind of drug. Something I like about Nightslink is its treatment of reality, of the physical world. As the game progresses, it begins to collapse, unable to hold the weight of the giants that dwell in it. As you revisit the same apartment complex over and over, all the game ever does is ask you more questions and give you no answers. Reality folds in on itself as you revisit the apartment again. Everything is wrong. As you continue walking, you're suddenly back where you recorded these strange sounds, where something awaits you. Night's Link ends with giants rising behind the dead city buildings. At that moment, it doesn't matter what the tapes were, or what any of what you were doing was. Whether the tapes represented the secret distribution of media or the call of addiction, at the end of the day, it doesn't hold a candle to what happens after. These gigantic things rise in the distance, a product of the tapes that you've spread, representing something that we simply can't discern. We can give the game whatever lore breakdowns or metaphorical readings that we want, but these giants aren't ever going to be explained. But somehow, they feel responsible for everything. The giants representing a feeling rather than being true physical threats reminds me of the scariest moment in any game I played this year was in Kitty Horror Show's Lethargy Hill, one of 4 games in her 4th Haunted Cities collection. The game sets you in this open place, with winding paths that lead to nowhere but each other, all converging on a single pavilion. You can wander around a little, sure, but the thing that remains consistent throughout Lethargy Hill is the story. Text crawls onto your screen, forcing you to read it, telling a twisted, dark fantasy of sorts of a woman who wants a family. She takes apart pieces of herself, of bodies in the woods, to create a husband, a sister, 2 children, made to serve her twisted idea of a family. A husband that roams the house and whimpers. A sister to be jealous. Children who will love each other and hate her, or hate each other and love her. Made of spiders and skin and blood. As the story continues, text interrupts the screen abruptly, with messages that sound like they're from this woman. Had plans for this place. Always plans. My arms hurt. My veins miss the old poison. Sometimes, after the text appears on screen, not much changes. The text it interrupted continues to scroll by. The environment is unchanged. But other times, it does. The sky gets darker and angrier, with black lines phasing in and out of reality, looking almost like they're converging on the house on the hill, the woman's home, a place that feeds on the forest around it. And then the woman gets bored. The sky becomes a solid red as the story reaches a boiling point, the family members not doing what the woman wants them to do. The envious sister goes too far and damages the house. The daughter loves her sister. The son falls and reverts into blood. Her husband is pulled apart. She lures her sister into the woods, taking her body apart. And as the last family member, the sister, is dealt with, your environment casts judgment. Silhouettes of black angels fill the sky as a horn sounds without melody, just an oppressive booming. The sky is filled with blood red, only cut off by lines of black. The story continues. The woman kills her daughter, but it's hard to focus on the story on screen when these giants are here. They're aggressive, participatory. They aren't just there to watch. They're here to mock, to oppress. They show themselves to us, make themselves known, obvious, and yet there's nothing we can do about it but watch. They look like angels, almost, but the angle of their wings is unnatural, their bodies obscured, like something's just wrong and you don't know why. As they hover over the screen, you're once again reminded that you can't look down, you can't look away, and I've never felt so exposed. Chills ran up my back when I tried to turn away from an angel, only to see the silhouette of another over the horizon. The giants feel like judgment. Strangely enough, it seems like the less we know about giants, the more terrifying they are. It's easy to classify whales and other giant creatures under the sea, to find explanations for them. And many other giants aren't really around. We've found traces of colossal beings in the distant past, all of which are now long gone, and all we've got to remember them by is their skeletons and their appearances in fiction, where they can't harm us. For all of its giants and mysteries, all of the gargantuan creatures in Elden Ring are either dead or put down by our hand. These godlike beings are all susceptible to a person with a sword and with an obsession with rolling around. Though much of the ocean is unexplored, we've still seen what it has to offer from top to bottom. We've found the colossal squids that dwell below, and it's just an animal, like any other creature, only somewhat bigger. Which, at least to me, makes it seem like the only giants that we're yet to find are the most terrifying. The existentially challenging ones, still unseen, still waiting. Giants larger than life.